Yeah, I want to, I want to jump right into safety because I think a lot of people have that question, right? I think if you grew up on Hollywood, then you think of Latin America or South America, and if you haven't traveled or lived there, and you probably got some weird images in your head, right? And then maybe you go on a message board and somebody's freaking out about something, and you wonder, what's safety like? So I want to open this up to a few minute conversation on what we feel, our opinion on safety. Everyone's going to have their own angle and their own viewpoint. Of course, probably the three of us, have slightly differing views, even perhaps. But let's talk a little bit about safety. So I'll just start and share from my perspective. So I grew up in Vermont. I then lived in New York City for about 15 years. I spent time in Massachusetts and Connecticut in areas that were more safe, less safe, so on and so forth. So that's kind of where my perspective comes from. Ecuador in general, if you look statistically, is a safe country. Now that being said, there's areas like anywhere that are absolutely not super safe, right? So there's, Guayaquil, for example, is not what I would consider a safe city. You can still go to Guayaquil. I go there all the time for different things. You can go, you can do what you got to do, but you got to watch yourself. There's places you wouldn't go. Again, just like any city in the world, there's places you wouldn't go. There's times of night where you would watch where you're at and where you're walking and all those kinds of things. You got to be careful about taxis, and there's things to watch out for in Guayaquil. There's other places that the border towns up north, for example, on the coastal border up north, even inland up north as well. There's some dangerous, relatively dangerous areas. The southern border towns that are on the coast, they're not super dangerous, but again, there's activity, there's things that go on there that you got to watch yourself a bit. It's not a place like I'd set my life up in, for example. But most of the country is pretty safe. The Orient, the Amazonian region, is essentially 100% safe. You never hear about crime in the Amazonian region to speak of. In the Sierra, where we are in the mountains, would be considered the second, safest region after the Amazonian region. The coast is not quite as safe as the other two. And then here it's kind of area by area, right? There's some parts of Quito that would be a little bit shadier. This region, Loja, Vilcabamba in general, is very safe. So, crime's a little bit different here, right? You don't have as much you don't have as much sort of violent crime that we would think of. You do amongst there's cartels on the coast that you hear about that get into little spats and little where they're shooting each other occasionally, right? So you have some of that stuff, but you don't have citizens often being targeted in terms of violent crime. What you do have is some petty crime. You do have some petty theft. People are more likely to take a shovel than they would be back home. So petty theft, I think that's true in all of Latin America, is just a little bit more common than it would be back home. This particular region, the culture is very traditional. So children are responsible to their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and uncles and their community. So in this region, you don't see graffiti and you don't see kids out smoking weed and causing trouble, and you don't have that sort of stuff that we're very used to in the States, right? You don't have that stuff, and people here care about their communities. So there's definitely that I really like that part of the culture here, especially in this region. People are very proud of this area. They're proud to keep it clean. They're proud to keep it safe. So that's just true from my perspective. Now, there has been times in Vilcabamba where there's been break-ins, where there's been sort of a crew that rolls through, and they're never from here. They get arrested eventually, and you find out where they're from, but they're almost never from here. So there'll be sort of a crew that comes through, and for some period of time, I've been here 10 years. I think it's happened 3 times since I've been here. Right when I got here, there was maybe a few months like that, and then somewhere around I don't know, some years later there was another little stretch like that, and then just recently one ended. So people there was some robberies going on. The community organized, the police got involved. people got arrested, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks ago, something like that, and then it stopped. And that's kind of been the cycle since I've been here. But overall, for me, I've got 3 kids, including a 14-year-old daughter. She walks around and does her thing. You don't even think about it. People don't worry about getting robbed on the street, or nobody's getting beat up on the street or anything like that. Again, there is an occasional home break-in, and that's kind of about it. But
and those seem to be opportunistic crimes. Like the crews are running in and they're targeting people that are either single sometimes, or people that may not have security at their house. They're intended. These are definitely opportunistic crimes, not just general randomness. So
Sure.
the fact that they're coming in and they're putting a stop to it in the community, the really cool part of the little wave, or whatever you want to call what recently happened here, is the community organized. Expats and local Ecuadorians, they organized together and put a stop to it. Nobody was happy about it. Nobody wanted to see it. It was really awesome to see everybody come together and really put a stop to it. And working directly with the local police, it was pretty awesome.
Yep. Yeah, there was a few community meetings where the police called for a meeting with the local authorities from Loja and the people from here, and people got to ask questions and strategize about how to put an end to this. Of course, the police helped people with improving their security system on their properties, just give people some ideas, some strategies, some solutions, to prevent robberies, break-ins. But like Jesse said, once these guys were arrested, it basically stopped. From what I understand, nothing else.
I haven't heard of anything since then.
In our neighborhood, we have a WhatsApp group for all of the neighbors. So anytime there's someone suspicious, an alarm turns on, the dogs are barking at night, people will start exchanging messages, take a look. So far nothing has happened. But yeah, neighborhoods are getting organized like that. There's a big WhatsApp group, general security for all of Vilcabamba. There's hundreds of people on there. The police, all the police officers that are based here are on the group. So anytime there's something suspicious, someone takes a picture, sends a voice note, hey, and the police goes right away. And actually, that's how they were looking for these thieves that one night, where the community got together. Someone was robbed. They sent a message. People went right away to that person's house. The police came. You guys went out. I went out as well. There was probably at least 50 or 60 guys.
Yeah.
People with sticks and stones, and
We had baseball bats.
Well, it's like a real community watch. You guys are probably part of neighborhoods that have community watch groups. It's like that here, but it's almost more real here. It's more involved. It's not just, hey, we're having a community.
Communal, it's more tangible.
Yeah, it's like people actually care. You've got business owners and community members and gringos and everybody working together directly with the police, and the police are heavily involved when there was something like this. So it was really impressive to see everybody come together and really make a difference and put a stop to it. And it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was very inspiring to see how many people showed up and went out, and mostly local people. Of course, there were some expats, but a majority were locals. And you could see, the general feeling was like the local people hate the kind of when this stuff happens.
Yeah.
It's bad for the reputation. It's bad for business. It's bad for tourism. It just, creates a shadow over Vilcabamba. And it's not something that happens a lot, but whenever it happens, everyone hears about it. So some people, of course, are a little anxious about these things, but it looks like we put an end to it this way.
Yeah, and that's some great perspective that you hit on, Carl, because, only being down here for almost 2 years now, it's still fresh in my mind what crime is like, growing up just outside of Chicago and living in the suburbs. And you can see here, because it's such a small town and people know each other, word travels really fast. So when you have a place that's generally safe and much safer than anywhere I've lived in the United States, even rural areas, when you look at the actual crime that's happening here relative to places I've lived personally in the States, I'm allowing my kids to do things I would never let them do, even some rural areas that I used to live in. But the point you hit on, Carl, is that when you live in a place like this, where it generally doesn't happen and it's not common, when it does happen, people tend to not necessarily overreact, because it still sucks. It's real. You don't want it. But it's almost like overreacted to, and everybody talks about it, and everybody posts about it, and you're seeing it everywhere, and then it becomes almost overstated in a way. it still doesn't take away the severity or the realness or the downside of it, but it's almost talked about by everybody, and then all of a sudden that's the only thing everybody's talking about, right? So, but the perspective is that on a relative scale, it's much less here. It's much safer than anywhere I've lived, and I believe that because I allow my kids, I make different decisions for my own children, and I think we all have done that, and you see that, and that's the reality for me coming from where I've come and being here, that sometimes the fear side of things doesn't need to take control. If we keep it in perspective and we do our due diligence and we have, you know, appropriate discernment on decisions we make as a community, things change, and you can have a real impact and not live in fear here.
Yeah, and a quick side note, you know, our office in Vilcabamba is downtown. Half of our staff is Ecuadorian, or more than half of our staff is Ecuadorian.
Right.
When these things were happening, I feel like sometimes expats will just talk to each other, but they won't really get the local perspective. And we're really immersed in the local community here. Our offices, all of the businesses around our offices are owned by locals. People would come talk about these things, and just repeating, you know, the general feeling in Vilcabamba is local people here want to get rid of anything, any delinquency, any crime, anything that gives a bad image of Vilcabamba, you know. So people that was the general feeling. And sometimes expats, if they don't really mingle so much with the local, they think that maybe the Ecuadorians don't care about the expats. If an expat gets robbed, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter. That was not the case at all.
Right.
They actually, they know that tourism is important here, that we bring, you know, positive things for the economy here, and that these things are.
Well, and
really bad.
there are friends and neighbors too, and
Right,
it's like
right.
that's, you know.